Question: what is Azure Function App? Answer: Azure Function App is a serverless compute service that enables you to run small pieces of code without the need for explicitly managing infrastructure. Question: what is the consumption plan in Azure Function App? Answer: the consumption plan is an auto-scaling, event-driven hosting option that only charges you for the compute resources you actually use. Question: what are the advantages of using the premium plan for Azure Function Apps? Answer: premium plan offers better scaling options, net integration, enhanced performance, and the ability to run your functions indefinitely. Question: how does the dedicated plan differ from other plans? Answer: in a dedicated plan, the functions run on dedicated VMs, providing more control over the environment, but require manual scaling and cost management. Question: what is trigger-based execution in Azure Function App? Answer: trigger-based execution means that Azure Functions can start execution in response to an event like an HTTP request or a message in a queue. Question: how does Azure Function App integrate with DevOps? Answer: Azure Functions supports C/CD pipelines through Azure DevOps, enabling automated testing and deployment. Question: what role does IAM play in Azure Function Apps? Answer: identity and access management, IAM, in Azure Functions enables granular access control over who can execute, manage, and monitor your functions. Question: what types of events can trigger an Azure function? Answer: events such as HTTP requests, timers, changes in blob storage, or messages in a queue can trigger an Azure function. Question: what are app keys in Azure Functions? Answer: app keys are used to authenticate function invocations, allowing secure execution and access. Question: what files are essential for an Azure Function App? Answer: essential files include the function code files, host.json, and function.json that define bindings and triggers. Question: how can you manage the configuration settings in Azure Function App? Answer: configuration settings can be managed via the Azure portal, Azure CLI, or using the local.settings.json file in your local development environment. Question: what authentication mechanisms are supported in Azure Function App? Answer: Azure Function App supports OAuth providers like Azure Active Directory, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Microsoft account. Question: how does Application Insights help in Azure Function App? Answer: Application Insights provides real-time telemetry and logging, allowing you to monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize your Azure Function apps. Question: what is managed identity in the context of Azure Function App? Answer: managed identity allows your function app to easily access other Azure resources securely, without storing credentials in your code. Question: how can you take backups of Azure Function App? Answer: Azure Function Apps can be backed up manually through the Azure portal or programmatically using Azure CLI and PowerShell scripts. Question: how does Azure Function integrate with API management? Answer: Azure Functions can be exposed as APIs and managed using Azure API Management for better security, caching, and analytics. Question: how does Microsoft Defender for Cloud enhance the security of Azure Function apps? Answer: Microsoft Defender for Cloud offers threat protection and security posture management for your Azure functions. Question: what is the role of API definition in Azure Function apps? Answer: API definition provides the API specifications using formats like OpenAPI, making it easier to document and test your functions. Question: what is CORS and how is it configured in Azure Function App? Answer: Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, CORS, controls the domains that are allowed to access the resources in your function app and can be configured in the Azure portal. Question: what are advisor recommendations in the context of Azure Functions? Answer: Advisor recommendations are guidelines provided by Azure to improve the performance, security, and availability of your function apps. Question: what are extensions in the context of Azure Function app? Answer: extensions are packages that extend the capabilities of Azure Functions, allowing for integration with additional services like Cosmos DB, Signal, and more. Question: what is the purpose of locks in Azure Function app? Answer: locks prevent accidental deletion or modification of your function app, enhancing resource management and security. Question: how can you set up alerts for an Azure Function app? Answer: alerts can be configured in the Azure portal using Azure Monitor, allowing you to receive notifications for specific metrics or log queries. Question: what metrics are available for monitoring Azure Function app? Answer: metrics such as execution count, execution time, and error rate can be monitored using Azure Monitor. Question: how can diagnostic settings be configured for Azure Function app? Answer: diagnostic settings can be configured in the Azure portal to send telemetry data to services like Azure Monitor Logs, Application Insights, or storage accounts. Question: what types of logs can be monitored in Azure Function app? Answer: application logs, web server logs, and event logs can be monitored to troubleshoot issues and understand the behavior of your function app. Question: how can you perform a health check on Azure Function app? Answer: Azure Functions provides built-in health endpoints to check the status and health of the application. Question: what is an HTTP trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: an HTTP trigger initiates a function in response to an incoming HTTP request. Question: what is the purpose of a timer trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: a timer trigger allows you to run a function at specific intervals, defined using a cron expression. Question: how does a blob trigger work in Azure Functions? Answer: a blob trigger is activated when a new file is uploaded or an existing file is updated in an Azure Blob storage account. Question: what is a queue trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: a queue trigger initiates a function whenever a new message is added to an Azure queue storage. Question: how does a table trigger work in Azure Functions? Answer: a table trigger is invoked when there are changes to a table in Azure table storage, such as an insert, update, or delete operation. Question: what is a Cosmos DB trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: a Cosmos DB trigger fires when there are changes to documents in a specified Azure Cosmos DB collection. Question: how is an Event Hub trigger used in Azure Functions? Answer: an Event Hub trigger is invoked when an event is sent to an Azure Event Hub, allowing real-time data stream processing. Question: what activates a Service Bus trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: a Service Bus trigger is activated when a message is sent to a Service Bus queue or topic. Question: what is an Event Grid trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: an event grid trigger fires when an event is received from Azure Event Grid, allowing serverless event routing. Question: how does an IoT Hub trigger work in Azure Functions? Answer: an IoT Hub trigger fires when telemetry data is sent to an Azure IoT Hub. Question: what is the role of a Signal trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: Signal trigger allows functions to be activated by events in an Azure Signal service, facilitating real-time communication. Question: how does a RabbitMQ trigger work in Azure Functions? Answer: a RabbitMQ trigger activates a function when a message is sent to a specified RabbitMQ queue. Question: what activates a Kafka trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: a Kafka trigger fires when an event is produced or consumed in a Kafka topic. Question: how can you export telemetry data in Azure Function app? Answer: you can configure diagnostic settings to export telemetry data to Azure Monitor Logs, Azure Event Hubs, or Azure Storage. Question: can you stream logs in Azure Functions? Answer: yes. You can stream logs in real time using the Azure portal or Azure CLI, which aids in immediate debugging and monitoring. Question: how can you customize health checks in Azure Functions? Answer: health checks can be customized using code by responding to HTTP requests at the built-in health endpoint, allowing you to include your own logic for determining health. Question: can Azure Functions be exposed as a SOAP service via API management? Answer: yes. Azure Functions can be wrapped as a SOAP service using Azure API management, though the function itself will still be RESTful. Question: how does Microsoft Defender for Cloud help in compliance? Answer: Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides a range of compliance reports that can help you understand your compliance posture against industry standards. Question: how do you import an API definition into Azure Functions? Answer: an API definition can be imported using a Swagger or Open API specification file through the Azure portal. Question: how many origins can you specify for cause in Azure Functions? Answer: you can specify up to 64 origins for cause, or use a wildcard for unrestricted access. Question: how do you manage environment variables in Azure Functions? Answer: environment variables can be managed through the Azure portal under the Configuration tab, or they can be set in the local.settings.json file for local development. Question: are advisor recommendations available for every Azure Function app plan? Answer: yes. Advisor recommendations are available for all plans to help optimize the performance and security of your Azure Function apps. Question: how do you install extensions in Azure Functions? Answer: extensions can be installed using the Azure portal or by modifying the extensions.csproj file and running a restore operation. Thanks for watching.